today's video, we're re-diving into some of the most shocking and real-life industrial accidents that actually happened. So let's get started. Story 1. The Acid Tank Incident. On February 9, 2019, 54-year-old Daniel Hill was on shift at Michigan Seamless Tube in South Lyon, Michigan. He was still new to one of the most dangerous tasks in the plant, checking the acid tanks. These were large open vats filled with hot sulfuric acid, heated to about 160 F. The acid was used to strip rust and scale from steel tubes before they were processed further. Just after noon, Hill walked across the platform above one of the tanks. The floor was slick with mist from the fumes, and the air smelled sharp, burning the nose and throat. At around 12:20 p.m., something went wrong. Hill slipped and fell directly into the vat of acid. Co-workers nearby rushed to pull him out. They managed to drag him from the tank within moments, but the damage was already catastrophic. The acid had soaked through his clothes instantly. His skin and flesh burned on contact. Witnesses later said it was one of the most horrifying things they had ever seen. They brought him to a safety shower and tried to wash the acid off with water. The hot chemical solution had already covered most of his body. His skin was peeling away. Despite the agony, he was conscious, screaming in pain as they tried to rinse him. Paramedics arrived quickly and rushed him to the University of Michigan Hospital in Ann Arbor. Doctors did what they could, but the acid had burned too deeply. His injuries covered almost his entire body, and nothing could reverse the damage. Daniel Hill survived for nearly 11 hours after the fall. Throughout that time, the burns caused unbearable pain. Doctors gave him medication, but even then, the suffering was beyond what most people could imagine. At 11:30 that night, he died from his injuries. Federal safety officials later investigated. In their report, the details of his death were reduced to a single cold line. Employee falls into tank of sulfuric acid and is killed. Months later, Michigan regulators fined the company $32,500 for safety violations. Hill left behind a family and grandchildren. His death was described as both slow and agonizing as he burned alive from the inside out, surviving for hours in unrelenting pain. Story 2. The Tuna Oven Incident. On the morning of October 11, 2012, 34-year-old Milena began his shift at the Bumblebee Foods plant in Santa Fe Springs, California. He had worked there for years and knew the routine. The factory was enormous, filled with forklifts, pallets of canned fish, and long rows of machinery. At the heart of the operation were the ovens, industrial pressure cookers large enough to hold thousands of cans at once. Each was more than 30 feet long, with a thick steel door that sealed tight before steam and pressure built inside. Just before 5 a.m., Milena started his usual tasks, loading carts full of tuna into one of the ovens. These carts rolled on tracks, pushed into the chamber one after another. Once the oven was full, the door would close and the cooking cycle would begin, raising the heat to more than 270 F under intense steam. It was a routine Milena had carried out many times before. At some point, Milena stepped into the oven itself to check on the carts. Nobody saw him go inside. On the busy floor, surrounded by noise and movement, it wasn't obvious that one worker had disappeared into the machine. A co-worker, not realizing Milena was still inside, sealed the door. With the push of a button, the cooking cycle began. The door shut with a heavy clang. Steam hissed through the pipes as the temperature began to climb. Milena was trapped. Once the system engaged, there was no release until the full cycle ended. Inside, the chamber grew hotter and hotter, turning into a massive pressure cooker. For the next 2 hours, the factory ran as normal. Pallets were stacked, forklifts beeped, and other ovens cycled through their loads. Nobody noticed he was missing. His station appeared empty, but on a floor with hundreds of moving parts, it did not draw attention. Only when the timer reached the end of the cycle did the truth emerge. Workers opened the oven expecting to unload cooked tuna. Instead, they found their co-worker. Milena had been inside the chamber the entire time, sealed in during the full 2-hour process. The accident horrified the plant. Federal investigators later described the event in plain words. A man had been cooked to death in the oven designed for fish. It was one of the worst industrial accidents in California's history. An ordinary shift ending with a death almost too brutal to imagine. Story 3. The Burrito Grinder Incident. On the night of July 13, 2025, a 19-year-old worker was on his shift at Tina's Burritos factory in Vernon, California. The plant produced frozen burritos on a massive scale with rows of machines running long after the daytime staff had gone home. He worked in sanitation, cleaning the equipment after hours. At night, his task was one of the most dangerous in the building, washing down the industrial grinder that processed meat and beans. The machine was as big as a car, fitted with steel blades designed to pulverize food in seconds. Shortly before 9:30 p.m., something went wrong. Reports say the grinder was not fully shut down. As he leaned inside to clean it, the machine suddenly roared to life. In an instant, the whir of the blades turned into a nightmare. His clothing caught, and before he could pull back, his body was dragged toward the spinning metal. He screamed for help. Coworkers nearby heard him and ran. They tried to hit the stop switch, but the machine was already tearing through him. The sound of his cries echoed over the grinding noise. Witnesses later said it was the most horrifying thing they had ever seen. By the time the grinder shut down, it was too late. The 19-year-old had been pulled inside. First responders arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do. He was declared dead at the scene. For his family, the tragedy was unbearable. A teenager only just starting his adult life went to work one evening and never came home. His last moments were spent in unimaginable pain inside a machine built only to process food, not people. Story 4. The Iron Pot Incident. On June 2, 2022, 39-year-old Stephen Dirks came to work at Caterpillar's foundry in Mapleton, Illinois. He had only been at the job for 9 days. The plant made cast iron engine parts. On the melt floor stood giant open pots filled with molten iron, each one holding thousands of pounds of metal heated to more than 2,000 F. The heat from the floor hit workers in the face as soon as they stepped onto the platform. That morning, Dirks went to take a sample of the iron, a normal job done before the metal was poured. He carried his tools to the platform and walked up to the edge of one of the pots. There were no guardrails to stop someone from falling. The pot beneath him was about 11 feet deep, glowing with liquid iron that moved like water but burned hotter than lava. At some point during the task, Dirks slipped. In one step he was gone. He fell straight into the pot. There was no time to grab anything, no chance to hold on. His co-workers saw him fall, but the heat from the pot was so strong they could not get near. The molten iron consumed him instantly. At that temperature, survival was impossible even for a second. Later reports said he was immediately incinerated. Work on the floor stopped at once. First responders arrived within minutes, but there was nothing to rescue and no body to recover. The pot had to be left to cool down with workers ordered to keep their distance. In the following days, federal safety officials inspected the site. Stephen Dirks left behind 3 children. Story 5. The Printing Press Incident. On the morning of February 27, 2013, 26-year-old Jorge Perez arrived for his shift at Golden State Container in Los Angeles, California. The plant produced cardboard packaging for shipping and storage, and the factory floor was dominated by massive printing presses. Each press was the size of a truck, built with rollers and drums that stamped and cut cardboard into boxes. Perez had worked around these machines before. They were fast and powerful, pulling entire sheets of cardboard through their rollers in seconds. Workers had to be careful never to step too close. But when you spend hours in the same place every day, the danger can start to feel normal. That morning, Perez was assigned to one of the larger presses. It was running as usual, its heavy rollers spinning non-stop. At some point during the shift, he moved to near. At an instant, the rollers caught him. The steady rhythm of the press broke suddenly. Workers nearby heard the difference. The machine made a grinding sound, and then they heard shouting. Perez had been pulled inside. Co-workers rushed forward. They hit the emergency stop, but the machine did not release him. His body was trapped deep between the rollers. The press, designed only for cardboard, had gripped him with a force no person could survive. Firefighters arrived quickly. Crews began the slow process of dismantling the machine. Piece by piece, they removed heavy metal parts. The work lasted for nearly an hour as they tried to reach him without causing further harm. The factory floor was silent, except for the sound of tools striking steel. Workers stood back, watching in shock, unable to believe what they were seeing. When Perez was finally pulled free, it was too late. The rollers had crushed him. The coroner pronounced him dead at the scene. Closing_message. Remember, these stories are shared to teach important lessons and raise awareness. We do not encourage anyone to attempt these incidents. Always stay safe and make informed decisions. If you found this video informative, Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more educational and cautionary stories.